Welcome back. So, before we get to the news of the week episode, I have an announcement I want to quickly make, and it is a good news and bad news kind of announcement. The good news is I finally found a job. I finally worked at a retail store, and that today is my first day, and actually I just got back from my first shift about 20 minutes ago. So, that's definitely good news. The fact that I finally found a job and income is started to come in because, after all, I was running very low in terms of the budget. And, all those jerseys that I've been recently buying, well, yeah, there's a reason why I kind of stopped buying as much jersey as I used to do about a year ago because, once that budget started to run low, that's when I can't really afford to buy those jerseys anymore. And now I got a new job. I cannot only just once again able to buy some jerseys, but I might have a chance to basically do more ground hop and also potentially do some away days with both the Quakes and the Loons in the future. Now, the bad news is that the retail store that I work at, most of the hours they gave me is at the nighttime. Now, I basically told them that I'm not going to be available on Saturday, and there's a good reason why I'm not available on Saturday, because that's usually the day where I'm not only ground hop, but also that's when it's the busiest day in terms of the MLS action. Although I probably should have told them that I'm also not available on Wednesday too, because then we also got the midweek action, and I think they're probably going to schedule me like at the night shift again on Wednesday, and that could be an issue where I am going to miss some of the action. And also, since, as I mentioned, most of the shift is going to be nighttime, don't be surprised if I would either do a review very early in the morning or very late in the morning, because between the afternoon and into the night, as I call the night shift, that's when, of course, I will be working. So for today, that's why this News of the Week episode was basically upload very late, because I want to do this right after when I finish my shift rather than just do it before. But that being said, in terms of news of the week episode, we definitely have a lot to get over because there was actually a lot of news that happened in this past week. But the first news we're going to talk about is actually kind of a mini preview in terms of tomorrow's game. So we will have a game tomorrow, and actually I will not be working tomorrow. In fact, tomorrow I'm actually going to do a dental filling, which, yeah, I'm definitely not looking forward to that, but also the fact that I do worry, if my mouth and teeth still hurts after when this game is over, I don't know how am I going to do the review between this game, between the Timbers versus Austin FC. I mean, I'll definitely watch it because this game will start at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, and it's also a late kickoff too, 8:38 p.m. local time, and this game is going to be on FS1. But in terms of the review, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not, hopefully my teeth doesn't hurt as much, that I can basically do the review without any problem after my dental filling that I did I'm going to do tomorrow. But in terms of this game, Portland are coming into this game with a 4-1-5 record, while Austin FC is coming into this game with a 2-4-5 record, but they are now winless in the last 7 games, and they've been shut out 6 out of their last 7 games. So goal scoring has been a big issue for Austin FC, and they're still looking to score their first ever goal at Q2 Stadium, as they're looking to do it for the 3rd game in a row. And against the Timbers, I'm pretty sure they want to bounce back after what happened in the last game, where it was a relatively frustrating game for the Portland Timbers, where they of course lost 1-0 at home against Minnesota United. And home losses this season, unlike previous 2 seasons, has been rare for the Portland Timbers, and it was kind of surprised how much they were struggling in that game. I mean, I know the Timbers has been dealing with injury, but it was kind of surprising, even with some of the attacking power that they had, they still couldn't able to to put the ball into the back of net. It's just one of those days for the Timbers where they just had those days where nobody can basically put the ball into the back net. So they're going to look to bounce back against Austin FC, but as I said, Austin FC are really looking to not only potentially get this 7-game winless run, which is tied with the San Jose Earthquakes as the longest winless run right now in the league, but also finally score a goal at Q2 Stadium and finally get that that duck out of the way. So she'll see tomorrow if that is going to be the case. Speaking of the San Jose Earthquake, so this is something I mentioned yesterday. The Quakes, of course, have fired GM Jesse Fionarelli. And, as I said, I'm not surprised the fact that the Quakes decided to make some personnel change because we knew this was going to happen. Like, after that embarrassing 3-1 loss against the Galaxy, you knew somebody is going to get fired. And it seems like it's the GM Jesse Fionarelli that gets the axe and not actually Matias Almeida. And the Quakes have mentioned that they are looking to keep Matias Almeida for the foreseeable future. Although, as I said, I don't know if that's going to be the case. If there is going to be a new GM coming in, and, that new GM coming in, and judging by the fact that why Almeida is still here, he might have a good relationship in terms of Fionarelli, and it just feels like Fionarelli was never going to fight Matias Almeida. Well, with a new GM coming in, it's going to be interesting if that is going to be the case. But, for Jesse Fionarelli, I'm not going to say he was the main problem of this team. He was part of the problem. I think a lot of Quakes fans have kind of said the fact that there is so much problem with this team right now, and they also have so much problem from top to bottom, where it's just not Almeida being kind of stubborn in terms of his tactics, and also Jesse Fionarelli making some very bad signings in the past 2 years, but also the fact that the ownership of this team is incredibly cheap, and I just feel like there's got to be some way potentially John Fisher is forced to sell the team. And what sucks about it is that really the only way he might be forced to sell a team is if he says something allergically bad, or say something that is kind of racist, something similar to what Dale Lloyd Hansen did with RSL just last year. But the thing about John Fisher is that he's been quiet with the Quakes. He doesn't usually make a public appearance for the Quakes, and that's also another thing that frustrates Quakes fans, because it's almost like he doesn't even care about this team. So yeah, there's really no way you can force him to sell the team unless if he decided to step down, and that's the problem that the Quakes has been having. And again, I definitely condemn people who in this fan base, or people in the Quakes fan base, have been protesting and stuff like that and putting pressure on John Fisher. But at the end of the day, it's really up to him. It's his decision of whether or not if he wants to sell the team or not. And fans can only do as much unless if the owner decide to sell the team, and that's just kind of the reality of it. And it's why for me, I just I want to be part of the movement, but at the same time, I don't know if it's going to do anything. I mean, it's kind of like you want to join a movement to remove a leader or something like that, but unless that leader is doing nothing wrong whatsoever besides not caring about your organization, it's hard to basically remove him and really just kind of get rid of him at the end of the day. And it's only his decision to make whether if he wants to leave or so. So yeah, again, it's a very tough situation that the Quakes are in, and I understand the frustration. I'm obviously very frustrated. I mean, I've been supporting this team for eight years now, and it's kind of frustrating that every single year, during my 8 years supporting this team, I've only seen this team made it to the playoffs twice, and I wasn't even part of that magical 2012 run when they won the Supporters Shield. And the fact that they have not won a playoff game ever since I started supporting them, just to show you how frustrating this has been. And again, I'm just hoping things will eventually change. And I know things have changed with this team now firing Jesse Fionarelli, but it's only the beginning. There's still a lot of things that needs to change the team, and unfortunately it feels like the Quakes are back to where they were in 2018, where I said back in 2018 that they really need to have a clean house. It seems like it's the same thing again. I just feel like they need to do a clean house again, and unfortunately have to go through that kind of rebuilding mode that we basically encountered back in 2017, and also back in 2017, 2019, and now potentially heading into next season. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news, is that MLS is currently investigating the alleged racial abuse incident in the Portland Timbers versus Minnesota game. So, obviously, we talked about this in the last review, where there might have been a racial abuse incident involving Franco Fragapane and Diego Chara, and how Fragapane might have said something that is racial abuse toward Chara, and obviously Chara is not happy about that. Now, when I look at this situation, this situation really reminds me of the the Adama Diamande situation, I think a couple of years ago. Remember when Diamande says that he basically was racially abused by a couple of Timbers player, but you know, when the league they basically investigate, they couldn't really kind of find anything, and eventually they kind of dismissed this case. And it feels like it's the same thing here, where you know the league didn't really hear much about it, and that, you know, unless if there's no evidence in terms of the fact that Fragapane indeed did actually say those racial abuse toward Diego Chara, you know, it's kind of really hard to try to punish him. And I know there's a lot of people that speculate that of course is the case, but remember, those are just speculation, and speculation is something that I think people nowadays kind of take that too seriously, knowing the fact that that is the case, even though there's no evidence in terms of proving that. So at the end of the day, I just feel like, you know, unless if they actually find some real evidence and we get more news of this story, I just feel like maybe we're not going to have any punishment that is going to happen. And again, it's going to be something similar to what we saw with the Diamande situation, where after a couple of weeks when the league basically found no evidence that Diamande was being racially abused by some of the Timbers player in that US Open Cup game, they basically just dismissed the case. And it just feels like could be the same case, unless if the league actually make it. Yeah, unless the league basically found some evidence that indeed Fragapane did say something racist toward Diego Chara. Now, speaking of the league and also the disciplinary committee, who I think the disciplinary committee is also looking into this. Well, the disciplinary committee has fined Fafa Pico for kicking the ball toward the stands. Now, this is something that I actually didn't mention during the review, and also this is why sometime in the review I don't mention some of the thing, and you probably know that that's probably the game that I didn't watch. So I didn't see in this incident that Fafa Pico actually did kind of a Kaku situation where he got frustrated in terms of the foul and decided to blast the ball into the stands. Now, he is very fortunate that he only got fined for this, because imagine if he did hit a fan, and again, having the same situation that we had with Kaku a couple of years ago, then he's definitely going to get a suspension out of that. And this is kind of the thing that frustrates me about players. Like, I understand that you're frustrating when you're on the field, but there's no need to kick the ball into the stands and kick the ball toward the fans to kind of express your frustration. And in any ways, you're basically hurting those fans and maybe even hurting your reputation because of that. I mean, ever since Kaku basically did that, his reputation has really gone downhill right now. And yeah, again, for Fafa Pico, he is very fortunate that when he kicked that ball into the stands, it did not hit any fans that was in the Dynamo crowd. And I know even though it's in he hit the ball into his own fans, it still doesn't change anything. You still did something that should not be doing, and I think he is very fortunate that he only got away with a fine in this incident. Now, Austin FC striker Danny Houston is done for the season, as he is undergoing hip surgery, and unsurprisingly, Austin FC immediately look for a replacement. It seems like they have found it, as they signed Senegalese youth international Moussa, and I'm gonna completely butcher this name unless I hear what a broadcaster say, but I believe it's Jetty. That's how you pronounce. I don't think the D is actually not a silent D. I think it's a silent D. But he, of course, it comes from League 2. I forgot which side exactly he was, and you know, there's definitely. And unsurprisingly, Austin FC has immediately looked for a replacement. In fact, they have found a replacement, as today they have recently signed Senegalese Youth International, and I am going to absolutely butcher this name unless I hear how a broadcaster pronounced, but I believe it's Moussa Jete. That's how you pronounce. I believe the D is actually silent, but if it's not, then I'll probably completely butcher that, and this is why, unless when a real broadcaster actually know how to pronounce his name, and then I started to hear it a couple of times, then I would eventually get used to the name. But, you know, he, of course, comes from League 2. I forgot which side exactly he is from, and apparently he's relatively young. I think he's only like 20 years old, and he have scored like 16 goals in a span of 47 games. And you know, what's also interesting is that, you know, we've been hearing there's rumors that Austin FC potentially is going to sign a DP striker, and we thought he was going to be that DP striker that's going to be coming to Austin FC. But when I read the article talk about this signing, I didn't hear anything about designated player kind of labels. So something tells me they might bring in another striker, or might bring in another attacker in terms of that in terms of that final DP spot, because obviously Austin FC does have one more DP spot open in their roster. But either way, this feels like it's a desperation move, knowing the fact that, right now, as I mentioned, with them not scoring in 6 of their last 7 games, they are desperate in terms of having someone in that number 9 position that can bang in the goals for them. Now, Charlotte FC have signed youth international or U.S. Youth International Adam Armour from Bundesliga 2. Now, this I actually know which club he's from in the 2nd division, and it's Nuremberg that he is from. Now, I haven't heard a lot about this kid and, how many minutes he has played for Nuremberg, but apparently he is a fullback, and it seems like he is going to be joining Charlotte FC. And what's going to be interesting about Charlotte FC heading into next season is that they have one fullback that is 37 years old in Christian Fuchs that has a lot of experience, and then they potentially might have him be in the starting 11, and he could be like 17 years old coming in. So that's kind of a huge age difference in terms of both fullbacks, but something tells me he could maybe use as a depth piece, because again, he's a relatively young kid, and I think he's only like 17 years old. And the reason why maybe he decided to come back to the U.S. is just kind of continue to develop, maybe even earn a starting spot for Charlotte FC before potentially making that jump back to Europe and potentially sign with a better Bundesliga side. Now, moving on in terms of the next news and some more signings that has happened, because there was a lot of signings that happened in this past week. Montreal has signed Icelandic Youth International Robert, and anytime when there's an Icelandic name, I usually butchered it at first. I think it's Forkilsson, that's how you pronounce his last name. But yeah, the Icelandic movement in MLS continue. I mean, we have really got a lot of Icelandic players in these past couple of years. In fact, I think MLS might have the most Icelandic player in any league in the world right now, because again, there's just so many Icelandic players that has been signing or has coming to MLS, and he of course is the latest one. And just as I mentioned with the previous 2 signings, he's a relatively young kid that has been playing in the Icelandic First Division. I don't know much about him other than the fact that he is playing in that center back spot, and I've heard Montreal fans saying that he could potentially be a replacement of Louis Binks, who is now no longer with Montreal, as his loan with them is now ended, and he has now rejoined the parent club that of course is Bologna. Now, moving on in terms of the last signings that has happened today is that the Quakes actually made a signing. I actually kind of almost forgot that the Quakes, of course, made some signings, because again, this week it's been a miserable week for the Quakes with the Classico loss, and also knowing that we now have no GM in our team. Things are definitely looking doom and gloomy for this team. But one bright sign is that they did address one of the biggest issue that I feel like they clearly should have addressed last season. I mean, last season, I understand they tried to address the issue with the number 10 position and trying to get more attacking power, but I also kind of question the fact that why did they not sign a defender when their defense was the worst in the league last season? Well, it seems like they have addressed it, and again, unsurprisingly this season, they've also been among one of the worst teams in terms of the defensive end, and they decided to sign a Brazilian center back called Nathan from FC Zurich. Now, I don't know much about this kid. I don't know whether or not if he is going to be decent, but something tells me I'm optimistic that he is going to be decent. And again, we desperately need some center back help, especially with the way that really the only good center back that I know from this team is Tanner Beeson. And, even Tanner Beeson at times, he's still relatively young, and he does sometimes make some mistake, which I understand, because, again, young defender, usually they still do make some defensive mistake. And then some of our veteran kind of defender like Florian Youngworth and Oswaldo Alanis, who I think we're not going to renew his loan after this year, because I don't think he's the answer. They have been just absolutely terrible and have been an absolute liability in our back line. So it's unsurprising the Quakes decided to look for some reinforcement. And again, I'm really hoping this new guy called Nathan is going to fix, I wouldn't say completely fix our defensive issue, but at least put a bit of a stopgap and kind of stop the amount of goals that this team has leaked in these past couple of games. Now, moving on, in terms of now talk about the transfer rumors, and, it's been a while since we have heard a crazy transfer rumors about a big European star that potentially is going to come to MLS. But today we have heard that the Galaxy is report in open talks to sign Gareth Bale. Now, I think his contract with Tottenham actually ends either this year or heading into next year. But I have also heard before that Gareth Bale is open to come to MLS. And, for the Galaxy, they already have Chicharito, I believe. Don't they already have free DP slot, Phil? I mean, they have Chicharito, they have Jonathan Dos Santos, and actually no, I think they still have one DP slot open. I mean, I'm not used to the Galaxy having DP slot open because we know what happened last year with the whole DP fiasco where they had 4 DP. Well, they were on verge to have 4 DP unless Christian Pavone is taking a bit of a loophole kind of TAM contract, which somehow they actually work that out. But yeah, if they do sign Gareth Bale, I don't know if it's going to improve them in terms of the attack. I mean, right? I guess maybe them signing Gareth Bale is another way for them to have another lethal threat, because we know that this Galaxy team, in terms of this attack, it has been carried by Chicharito. And, it's not a bad thing, the fact that they've been kind of carried by Chicharito, because Chicharito has been lights out this season and is an early candidate to win MLS MVP. But the problem with that is that once he is shut down, and we've seen before where teams have been able to do a good job in terms of shutting down. We saw how the Sounders and the Timbers have done a good job in terms of that. And once he's shut down, there's really not much threat going forward on the attacking end. So it's understandable why the Galaxy are decided to do what they always have been doing, which is go to Europe and basically get these big name kind of European superstar player that might have their career winding down, but they're still going to get it because they need some name recognition and they need butts in the seats at Daily Health Sports Park. I mean, not that they need more butts in the seat. I mean, the Chicharito hype has probably got a lot of Galaxy fans in their butts in the seats and watch this team has played. But getting Gareth Bale, that's another big name coming into MLS. And yeah, we'll see whether or not, if this, of course, there's going to be any truth in terms of this. But now moving on, Atlanta United wingback George Bello is drawing interest from Galatasaray, England, and Belgium. Now, for me, I feel like if George Bello is going to go to Europe, the best place to do so is maybe go to England or Belgium rather than Galatasaray, because let's just say, Galatasaray, in terms of in Turkey, since we have heard a lot about those racism issue, and George Bello is an African American player, that might not be the best place for him to try to go to. Now, I'm not saying if he goes to England and Belgium, he's not going to face those same issue, because we know that there's times where some of those countries there has been racism that has happened, but it's not as bad as what we have seen in the Turkish Super League, where repeatedly we have seen there has been a lot of racism that is going on in this league. But we shall see whether or not, if any team, or for Galatasaray, if they offer a big amount of money for Atlanta United. And Atlanta United, they're one of the couple of teams in MLS is not afraid to sell their big name player, and if the offer is right, they're going to try to cash in terms of that. And I just feel like if the amount is right for George Bello to move on to Europe, Atlanta United will be wasting no hesitation to sell him. And I also feel like George Bello could potentially be a future U.S. men's national team player. I mean, I know these last year or so he's been suffering from injury, but knowing the fact that the fullback position is one area that the U.S. has struggled in the past and have players that haven't really fit into that system. If George Bello does well when he goes to Europe, he could most likely get some caps with the U.S. men's national team in the future. But now moving on, away from talk about transfer report to now talk about some good news. If you are a Vancouver Whitecaps fan, and that of course is that you might get a chance to watch your team play at home at BC Place, as there is a report suggests that the BC government have set to open sporting events to 50% in Vancouver, and part of the report they have said that the Canadian government is set to reopen the border in the US and Canada, which means that not only the fact that it's good news for the Whitecaps, but that's also good news for TFC and Montreal, as currently they're still stuck in the U.S. and have to ground share in terms of some of the teams that they have, and you can also see it has really took a toll in terms of that. I mean, I think the only team, free Canadian team, that maybe hasn't taken a lot of the toll of it is Montreal, but recently you can see some of the result that Montreal has had hasn't been that good. And of course, we know what's going on with TFC and Vancouver, where both of these teams are just going through a downward slope. And I know people will say, well, that feels like just an excuse, the fact that of course is the case. No, it's not really an excuse. I mean, try to be on a team that you basically have to play your home game in front of no fans whatsoever, and you're basically living in an area that you're not used for. Well, basically the other 24 franchise gets to have fans in the stands and play in the home market. Like that does have a psychological sense, and that definitely has to deflate in terms of these free Canadian team, where it just feels like they're still stuck in terms of that pandemic mode when everybody has basically gone back to normal. Heck, almost everybody has gone back to normal, because almost every team in MLS has gone back to 100% capacity. So yeah, I think for those that say that it's an excuse, the fact that that these team that is stuck in terms of playing in the U.S. with no fans whatsoever, it doesn't actually take a toll. No, it does take a toll to this team, and you're definitely starting to see some of the performance that is going to happen. But as I said, with the Canadian government potentially are going to reopen borders, I think all these Canadian teams is going to go back to their market, and hopefully, I know immediately it's not going to be 100%, but even if it's going to be 50%, I mean, I know right now in the NHL, with the Stanley Cup final, the Montreal Canadiens are able to travel across the border because the Canadian government has granted their permission to do so. And they also have been having fans in the stands in terms of their Stanley Cup final. And that, I feel like, is just kind of a hope that eventually we are going to get to that stage where the Canadian government is going to allow these MLS team and these Canadian MLS team return to their home market and once again play in their home market with fans in the stands, because I just feel like they desperately need it with the way some of the performance that has gone for these Canadian teams. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news, is that MLS will have All-Star Skill Challenge on August 24 at Bank of California Stadium. So the All-Star Skill Challenge is going to return, and I like the All-Star Skill Challenge. I mean, I did watch the one back in 2019 when it was in Orlando, and I feel like it was nice to see, and I feel like they could definitely bring it back, and they are going to be bringing it back this time. Although this time, unlike the last one where it was at the Wide World of Sports in Disney, this one is actually going to be taking place at Bank of California Stadium, and if you, of course, want to attend this All-Star Skill Challenge, I believe tickets is going to potentially be on sale very soon. And then finally, in terms of the last news of this week before we go to the power rankings, is that Chicharito, of course, wins Player of the Week. And I know there's a lot of SKC fans are angry about Daniel Shaarawy not winning Player of the Week, because technically Shaarawy actually scored more goal than what Chicharito has had in this past week. But, again, this Player of the Week award, I just feel like the league, if you are going to decide who you're going to give Player of the Week, are you going to give it to potentially a guy that, Daniel Shaarawy, no disrespect to him, but he's definitely not a well-known or a household name as Chicharito it is. I mean, if you mention Chicharito, of course, wins Player of the Week, everybody would know who he is and why he must have done some good thing. But if you mention Daniel Shaarawy and you don't watch Sporting KC regularly, then you probably think, who is this kid? I mean, I've never heard of this kid winning Player of the Week. Or maybe you're just new to MLS before 2018 when Daniel Shaarawy actually had a good season. And I think this year he's definitely having probably even better than what he had in 2018, because he's actually on verge of potentially scoring almost around the same amount of goals that he scored in 2018. So yeah, I mean, I just feel like the reason why they give it to Chicharito, mainly it's because of household name reason, and not really maybe he probably deserved the win. Although I will say that he kind of also deserved, because he put on a 5-star performance in that game against the Quakes in the Cali Classico. But finally, in terms of the power rankings, we got the top 2 remains the same, with the Seattle Sounder and New England in the top 2 spot. And in third place, we actually have a new third place team for the first time in 3 weeks. We got Orlando City moving up 2 spot. Same goes for NYCFC moving 2 spot up to 4th. Same goes for Sporting KC moving up 2 spots up to 5th. While the Union, of course, have a rough week this week. You know, they of course lost 1-0 to Columbus, and then they of course suffer that free draw. Well, I wouldn't say they suffer, but when you lose, when you're unable to win against the worst team in the league, then that feels like a loss to them. But yeah, it was a free draw that they of course had, which moved them down 3 spot. Then you got the Galaxy moving up 3 spot, followed by Columbus moving down 4 spot. You know, this week was also rough for Columbus. And actually, you know, the Union, they actually didn't lose to Columbus. I'm sorry, it's actually Columbus the one that lost to the Union. But again, I guess maybe when you lose or drew against the worst team in the league, then yeah, maybe the power rankings committee are going to say, yeah, you're going to have to draw some spot. And again, I'm not part of the power rankings committee. I don't like the power rankings committee making these power rankings. And I talk about before how they made some crazy kind of jumps before, which we're not seeing as much as we have in the beginning of the season. But yeah, I can understand why people can get upset in terms of the power rankings, and I'm trying my best to not get upset at it. And also, it's another reason for me to say this is the reason why I don't do power rankings anymore, because it's really worthless, and also it just gets people angry for no reason whatsoever, because at the end of the day, the power rankings doesn't matter. It's the standings that actually matters at the end of the day. But at 9th place, we got the Colorado Rapids, didn't move a single spot this week, and then you got the Portland Timbers, just able to stay in the top 10, despite the fact that they moved down 2 spots from last week. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for my News of the Week episode. As always, let me know in the comments below what you think of all these news here on the board, and if there's any news I didn't mention on the board, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.